Well, hello there.
Hiya.
Friends, lovers, thank you for Excuse me. Thank you for joining us. This is 5 Minutes with Robert and Amy Nasir, and you know who you are, and we are glad you are here on this fine Sunday, August 18th, 2024.
Yay, yay, yay!
Yay! I'm just looking at the title of the show. Why do I have it 18.8? I've got some kind of bizarre format there. We'll fix that. Thank you for joining us. We are glad you are here the night after GLOW. Yes, the night after Great Lakes Objectivists' monthly dinner meeting, which had a few highlights that we've got to share with you. But first, let me check my chat. Yes, the chat is looking good. Make sure we've got Facebook up as well, because I want to hear from you in the chat. In fact, I'm going to have some audience participation. A couple of things I need to hear from you as we go along. Let me, Facebook, as usual, is giving me a hard time bringing up the video. Someday I'll figure this out. What's the best way to bring up your own video so that I can see your comments on Facebook? So weird. But I will get that. You know, Amy, what I need to do is I need to have you come up with a script of like 30 seconds of things you want to say. Well, there it is. For some reason, it doesn't show up in my feed right away. But good. I see Jim Ashley is with us on the Facebook as well as the YouTube side. Welcome to you.
Well, should I be talking about bunnies anyway?
Well, you'll do that. Yeah, you'll do that regardless. You may have noticed a bit of a change to the intro music. If not, well, I'll just leave that out there as a teaser because I want to jump right to the matter at hand. One of those short shows, you know.
At hand.
Well, here's the show notes, folks, and you can see how short that is, right? Very short show today, August 18th, 1920. August 18th, 1920. Folks, you know we've been watching Murdoch Mysteries, a Canadian mystery series. Takes place in the late 1800s. Well, they've been on for 17 seasons. It's crazy. So
yeah, they're just a tad bit fantastical.
Oh, it's absurd. It's very silly, which is one of the reasons we like it.
Yeah.
There are all sorts of anachronisms, and you know the lead hero and other people on the show invent things like, well, they don't call them computers. They call them the 19th century equivalent of what it would be if somebody actually came up with that. Yes. Well, because it's been on for 17 seasons, they're now up to 1910. Which means,
already.
Yeah. It's weird. You think of it as an 1800s show, but no, they've been on for 17 seasons. Well, one of the quirky things in the show, one of the best characters on the show, just because he's really weird, super quirky, extremely intelligent, also happens to be a gay man. In fact, one of the recent episodes, he was put in jail for being gay.
Yeah?
No, well, 1910...
people were intolerant and ignorant.
Sodomy was illegal, and people associated sodomy with homosexuality, but to some people, no, it's not even that. There are just certain things you're not allowed to do, or there's something wrong with you.
Sex should be for procreation only in only certain ways, and, you know, there shouldn't be any enjoyment in it whatsoever, because God is watching.
That's right. Now, I thought I was pretty clever, creative, and knew a lot of things about human romance and sexuality. I know what sodomy is. Does anybody know what Gomorrah-y is? I think I may have missed out there. So, well, if there's
that's when you undercook a cake and it's all gummy and Gomorrah-y.
Oh. Well, then I don't understand the story of Sodom and Gomorrah, because I understand why Sodom was condemned, but why
that's
Gomorrah?
When people throw gum on the floor and then it attaches to your shoe.
Okay, well, that should be condemned. So, on this date, August 18th, but way back in 1920, in other words, 10 years after where we're at in this quirky television series, in 1920, on this very date, the 19th Amendment was ratified. Thanks to one vote, it almost wasn't ratified. And a dramatic battle in the Tennessee House of Representatives ended with the state ratifying the 19th Amendment to the United States Constitution on August 18, 1920. After decades of struggle and protest by suffragettes, we celebrated one of those suffragettes' birthdays last week. The decisive vote is cast by a 24-year-old representative who reportedly changed his vote after receiving a note from his mother. Now, 1920 in the United States. Okay, folks, We love the idea of the pre-World War I sense of life. Even Ayn Rand, the author and writer of The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged, said, for those who did not live before the First World War, it is impossible to convey the benevolent sense of life of that period in time. I don't doubt it. I believe it.
I mean, it's sort of like for those people who didn't live through the 80s, they really don't understand it. They won't be able to get how amazing it was.
That's true, too. But there is a balancing here. There is a bit of... would I love to see the sense of life of the late 1800s? The seriousness and the benevolence. Read newspaper articles from back then, and it just seems like people were smarter. They were much better. They expressed themselves. See, he's trying to express himself well. They expressed themselves so much better. They were just brighter. They were smarter. But they would put you in jail for having sodomy in your relationship. Especially if you were two men, obviously, of course. They would not let women vote. And in certain places, women couldn't own property or couldn't take out loans or couldn't do any number of things. But they could not vote. Slavery had just been abolished 65 years prior to that, and there was still incredible racism, both socially and in practice.
Yeah, Jim Crow laws and all that.
It's impossible to convey the benevolence and the charm of the late 1800s, but I think it's also impossible to convey how horrible it was, unless you watch a good television series, for example, which occasionally confronts just how terrible those things were.
Right. Yeah, would you want to live in the 1800s?
Exactly.
I mean,
exactly.
Not reenact, not cosplay, but actually live in that time period. Probably not.
Yes. I mean, a time before rock music. No, I mean a time before rights, individual rights for all people. Imagine if... Okay, this is going to be a bit of an Ayn Rand heavy show. For our folks who listen and watch and enjoy our shows who are not Ayn Rand fans, are not objectivists, come along anyway. You will enjoy this. Imagine if Ayn Rand and objectivism had come onto the scene in the early 1800s. We would have had those ideas of liberty, kind of like we did after the Founding Fathers. But we would also have slavery, and we would have no women's rights. We would have laws against atheism, laws against heresy, laws against homosexuality, archaic ideas about sex and the role of women, the rights of women.
I don't know how far Ayn Rand as a woman would have gotten. I don't know if she would have had the freedom that she had when she came over in the 1920s to the States. I don't think she would have had that kind of freedom. Exactly.
And that brings me to HBL, Harry Binswanger letter, the Harry Binswanger list. Some of you know who Harry Binswanger is, a brilliant philosopher in the objectivist school. And he runs a forum at hbletter.com that you can sign up for. By the way, it's not cheap. It's $22 a month. Well worth it, both for the forum that he runs. You can exchange ideas with other similar-minded thinkers. But he also does on Sunday mornings a meeting of the minds, a live, a Zoom call. And sometimes it's more like a show, sometimes it's more like an interview. Today it was really brainstorming because he was asking people, based on a quirky premise, but an important and kind of brilliant one too. Here, I'll go to the email he sent out, which you only get if you are a paying member.
Ooh!
But the topic for this morning's meeting of the minds, we're going to tie all this together, trust me. Any better ways to spread objectivism? Question mark.
Yes.
And he explains, Atlas Shrugged was published 2/3 of a century ago. And we have made some progress in spreading objectivism since then. But, and this is Harry Binswanger writing, if in 1964 you had said to me, well, in 2024 objectivism will still be mainly unknown, I would have replied, only if civilization collapses and we are rummaging in the forest for roots and berries. And Harry Binswanger goes on, I am planning to live many centuries. I appreciate that optimism.
Harry's going to be Lazarus Long.
That's right out of Time Enough for Love. Exactly. Robert Heinlein there. But I wonder, Harry goes on, I wonder if we will have to wait many centuries for objectivism to become the dominant philosophy, or is there some faster way to achieve that result? Harry Binswanger. I hope I should have asked him if he minds me sharing that little tidbit, but it's all the more reason for you to go to hbletter.com and sign up. I am a paying member. I don't even spend much time in the forum, which is rich. There's so much going on in the forum, so much being exchanged. For me, it's worth it just to attend the meeting of the minds every week, Sunday mornings, noon Eastern time. $22 a month. That's $5.50 for each one of these, which, you could spend on a cup of coffee if you went out for it instead of enjoying it here at my house. Excuse me. We've got by the way, the Forever Newlyweds mug. It goes along with today's theme here.
I wonder who those two people are.
Who are the Forever Newlyweds?
So Race in the chat says Cyberpunk Binswanger.
Cyberpunk Binswanger.
Yes.
He is. He's in some ways he's way ahead of us. He has had ideas that are so far ahead of their time, I'm not even sure they made sense. We had dinner with him once as part of a group, and he explained that the English language, for example, has so many exceptions, it's probably time to scrap it and do something from scratch. Just a language that makes sense. And this is not a new idea with Harry. People who work on, for example, Esperanto. The idea of, let's have a new language. It doesn't have to be a one-world language, but if enough people adopt it, think of when you were a little kid trying to learn English. If there hadn't been all of those exceptions, if you just had a language that followed the rules, not only would you have learned it faster, had fewer headaches, fewer stumbling blocks, fewer things in the way of you learning so that you can then go on to learn math and history and science and all the other things, but also it would have given you as a child a sense that, people make sense. People can be reasonable, rational. History doesn't have to be that complicated. Language doesn't have to be that So, anyway, point is, Harry now is saying, we got to spread these ideas faster. What can we do? And there were some great ideas that were offered.
Well, I remember one time, Harry, he's funny when he wants to be Harry Binswanger.
In objectivism, he's one of my favorite people.
Real twinkle in his eye. He said, of course objectivists will win because eventually we'll be the only ones who are literate.
It's funny because that's not literally true, but there is a sense in which that's actually true and how things are going to play out. So this date, 1920, women get the right to vote. Women's suffrage is finally passed. It's also Serendipity Day.
Oh, yes, Serendipity.
So happy Serendipity today. Okay, one of the things that came up, in fact, I think I may have been responsible for bringing it up, but one of the things that came up is we don't, in objectivism, we don't necessarily have the twinkle in our eye, the spark, the stage presence to sell these ideas, and we need that. We need to be the ones who project a joie de vivre, a lust for life, a joy of living. People who, when you go see an objectivist speaker, when you go to an event, or you watch a podcast online, or you take one of the seminars, whoever is presenting these ideas, you should be able to look at him and see, wait a minute, this guy's got something that other people don't have, and I want it. You should be able to see somebody who's living by these ideas has something extra going on. When you look at the star power of other podcasters or just other people out there, why is it that somebody like Jordan Peterson or Joe Rogan or Sam Harris or Steven Pinker, why do these people, it's not just their content. If it was just their content, you'd have to say, wait a minute. Steven Pinker has nothing whatsoever in common with Rachel Maddow or Joe Rogan or, any of the famous popular speakers who are having an impact. So the question is, what is the difference that makes the difference? And so what came up was, wait a minute. Why do things like The Secret work.
The secret.
People who believe in serendipity. People who believe in a sort of, cosmic justice out there that makes the law of attraction work.
Yes, and karma your dogma.
Yes, my karma ran over my dogma. Why? Why does this stuff gain purchase? And so I think on Serendipity Day, it's a perfect day to ask that question. Well, first of all, serendipity, the idea of charming and lovely things, charming coincidences.
Yeah, the occurrence and development of events by chance in a happy or beneficial way.
Yes. Serendipity has been described as happy accidents.
Yeah.
Or pleasant surprises.
Yeah, this is. I mean, when I think of this, other than my other associations for it, I think of Cheryl Brooks and Atlas Shrugged, and the introduction to her. Working at the dime store, at the counter, and then she goes home and she puts on her hat with the big flower on it, and she came to New York because she's expecting to find adventure and delight around every corner. And so she's searching for serendipity, and unfortunately, that didn't happen.
Right.
Although I think I rewrote Atlas Shrugged, and I had her come back and.
Yeah, in your rewrite, she had a serendipitous meeting with Dagny Taggart before she ever met Jim Taggart.
Yes.
And by the time she met Dagny's brother, they were both just laughing at him.
That's right. Yes.
The article that tells about Serendipity Day says, we're getting ready to commemorate Serendipity Day on August 18th by encouraging people to look for and appreciate the unexpectedly lovely things that are always out there, if only people took the time to notice them. I love that because I don't think serendipity, and there's no woo to it, or at least there shouldn't be. And a great place to kind of mine the concept, to get a little extra out of the concept, is the 2001 film, Serendipity, which everybody should have already watched by now because we've mentioned it more than once. If you have not seen John Cusack and Kate Beckinsale in Serendipity, well, you know what to do after this program wraps up. It is a charming romantic comedy, kind of like life should be. Consider the sense of life, what we call the childhood sense of wonder. Hopefully you felt that as a child. That idea that it didn't always happen, but there was always a chance of some wonderful surprise right around the corner. It turns out that's not much different than how life is. We generally get what we expect because there are good things happening all the time and there are bad things happening all the time. The reason why people believe really woo stuff like The Secret and really woo stuff like the law of attraction, the kernel of truth behind it is you do get more of what you focus on. Mm-hmm. Because you're focused on it. You see it more. The truth of the matter is there's just as much good out in the world as there ever was. And there's just as much evil out in the world as there ever was. But if you are spending all of your time, or even a larger percentage than half of your time, staring at one, I know you're not staring, you're not looking for it, it's just you're focused on reality. If you are spending all of your time looking for what's wrong in the world, you will find it. And if you do the same, looking for all that's right in the world, all of the opportunities, all of the things you can capitalize on, and all of the decent people who you can exchange values with, even if it's just commerce and buying a cup of coffee, you will find that too. Yeah.
One of the things I in marketing, working at the Henry Ford Museum in Greenfield Village, mm-hmm. One of our marketing terms is surprise and delight, which I'm sure is not unique to us, but we really take it seriously because it happens all the time, especially in Greenfield Village, in the museum too. But yeah, I mean, the idea here is that people come to Greenfield Village and they focus on that. They focus on being surprised and delighted. They focus on serendipitous things happening, and it happens all the time. I go into the village and I see people I haven't seen for in a long time. I meet new people whose best friends I know, and we talk about that. I talk about the history. I talk about all the things that are lovely, all the events that are coming up, all the wonderful things that are happening in people's lives, and how they relate and how they're relevant to the museum and to the history. That basically that turn of the century that you're talking about, that style, that culture is in Greenfield Village. So it's serendipity is it's something that is it still exists today, and I work at the place where it exists, so it's wonderful.
Yes. Yeah, Jim Ashley says there is serendipity in the short stories of O. Henry. Yes, that's his stock in trade, is the charming twist ending in which things work out, or at least work out differently than you expected them to. And in a lot of the old writers, we were talking about the late 1800s, we have a dear friend who is a great fan of Frances Hodgson Burnett, whose stories I've read, not just the children's stories like The Secret Garden or The Little Prince, but the adult stories as well. And there's real charm. And sometimes, it seems a little too benevolent, a little too easy to find those happy endings, except that's what most of life is like too. Mm-hmm. So it's not that bad things don't happen, and they happen in these stories, otherwise you wouldn't have a plot.
Yeah, I sure as heck hope people keep reading stories with happy endings, because again, I mean that keeps people focused on what might actually happen in their own lives. And yep. So keep doing that.
Exactly.
Keep doing it.
Just so. And in that regard, I want one more on this date. What do we have here? Charles Robert Redford Jr. Oh, Robert Redford. It's Robert Redford's birthday. Oh, we've mentioned before, the best Robert Redford film that he participated in was The Sting, which if you've never seen, you need to see. There's no end of good Robert Redford films. A great actor, enormous style, charm, and he's 88 years old and still alive. And, I love long lifers. It makes me think Harry's not that crazy when he says, well, I expect to live for centuries. Because there's so many great, people in general. We tend to focus on, actors and singers and artists, but just people who are in their 90s now and are still out there going strong, or at least going. And so happy birthday to Robert Redford. Everybody go out and watch The Sting if you've never seen it before. Otherwise, plenty of other good Robert Redford films for you to see.
Well, speaking of movies and serendipity,
yes.
Have we talked about that yet?
Have we talked about, we mentioned the film.
Okay, yeah.
What else would you like to say about it?
You should work. I don't know if you said, hey, everybody out there, you should watch Serendipity.
If you haven't yet seen it, you absolutely need to see it.
It's with John Cusack, and Joan, his sister, is in it.
Yeah, Joan Cusack has a role in the film.
I think Kate Beckinsale.
Yeah, Kate Beckinsale is the co-star.
And, and the one lady, I keep forgetting her name, She's the person who runs the New Age shop.
Oh, the comedian. Just slipped my mind too. Somebody will tell us in the chat. The lead actress's best friend who runs a woo shop, and it's funny because she is a skeptic of the woo that she sells, and I won't give any spoilers, but it's a charming premise, a charming plot, and I have quoted on this show before the main character's epitaph, his obituary. Don't worry, he doesn't die in the movie, but a friend of his writes his obituary as an exercise. And maybe I'll look that up while we're talking and read it before we wrap up here.
Yeah, Jeremy Piven is also in it.
Yes.
It's just a great film, and we watch it we've watched it probably about a dozen times in our lives, and
it never gets old.
We're probably, I don't know, usually when it gets up to that ranking, it's every 3 years.
Then we have to go a few years, yeah.
Yeah. Every 3 years. But yeah, it's wonderful. All right. So, we have Linda Cordair in our Facebook chat. Hi, Linda. How are you doing? Congratulations on your new website. She says she had a gallery guest in Jackson yesterday. Was very surprised to find his grandmother's sculptures there. The Art of Bobby Carlyle at Cordair.com. So go to Cordair.com and look up Bobby Carlyle, and that, I guess it was a guest that was surprised and delighted to find that was his grandmother's artwork.
Wonderful. And Cordair.com has been updated, so there are new features on the website. You should have been checking them out over the last few weeks. Anyway, very good. I did find that quote, or at least part of it, from the film, but I'm not going to read it now. I'm going to wait until the end. Those of you who've seen the movie already know what I'm going to say. But first, under shameless self-promotion, and what are we listening to this week? Well, I had to re-listen to my own Choosing Happiness, a prerequisite to achieving it, because I've been recommending it lately, and I needed to listen to it to find out if it's just as damn good as I thought it was, and it is just as damn good as I thought it was. So, if you haven't seen that yet, the link is in the show notes. You can either read it, the whole essay, the whole script is on my Substack, or just watch the video while you are singing in the shower or doing whatever you're going to do. The next link under What Are We Listening To This Week is If You Want to Sing Out, Sing Out, a song by Cat Stevens, who strangely enough did change his name later to Yusuf Islam, and then later just changed his name to Yusuf, and now releases albums where he slashes his name, Cat Stevens / Yusuf. It's unfortunate that he went through that change in his life, but early days, Cat Stevens, charming piece of music, and one of the main themes in the film Harold and Maude. Well, Harold and Maude came up on the Facebooks this week because of Paul Gay. You all know who Paul Gay is, the screenwriter, the man who co-wrote Liar, Liar, the 6th highest grossing comedy in history when it came out. And he gave us a link to an essay on Harold and Maude by Matt Zoller Seitz. Harold and Maude, Life and How to Live It. Those of you who have seen the film will know why an essay on the film would have that title, but this essay is so well written that if you love the movie, you will love this essay. And the link to that song, if you want to Sing Out by Cat Stevens. Because if you want to sing out, sing out. You should do that thing, and you'll see the tie to what I had to say when Harry Binswanger asked this morning, well, what do we need to accelerate the spread of this philosophy? Because it's exactly what I think, is that more of the people who talk about objectivism, who talk about philosophy, who talk about Ayn Rand, need to do it with passion. And I don't mean, fake passion and put on a big act and talk in a big voice and yeah, you really should. No, none of that. But if you've got passion in you, let it out. Show it. I compare that to the libertarians, who their big mistake, not the big mistake, one of the mistakes in libertarianism, one of the quirks, one of the things that really bothers me, and I see this on the right too, you don't see it as much on the left. The libertarians will say we want liberty, we want freedom. We don't want anybody telling us what to do. We want the government to, in John Galt's words, get the hell out of my way. But if you look for any indications at all, what for? Not just why liberty. There are a few people who've written essays on why liberty. And the better libertarians are smart enough to know, no, just point them to Ayn Rand's essays, Man's Rights and the Nature of Government. But if you ask a libertarian, well, why do you want to be free? What do you want to do with that freedom? What does that look like in reality? They get angry. They get indignant. How dare you? How dare you even ask what I intend to do with liberty? It's an affront. Now, it would be one thing if some suspicious person was saying, oh, what are you going to do with that liberty? But even if you ask them honestly and earnestly, the only answers that I usually get are, I want to smoke dope whenever I want. Which is fine if you're a dope smoker, but we need to do better than that.
Yeah.
The point is, they put the goal out there, and then the idea of giving it any examples, any content, any tie to reality, they are affronted by that. No, you give me liberty, and don't you dare even consider the question of what anybody's going to do with it. Well, fair enough, you don't have to justify it, but you should be able to explain it. And I see the same thing, well, not the same thing. I see a similar phenomenon in philosophy, where some of our most intelligent, our best informed, our most studied, really sharp spokespeople for philosophy never really get into the specifics of, well, what for? Maybe sometimes they'll talk in terms of a successful career, but what does that even look like? Friendships, relationships, actually, buying a house and driving a car and living and doing things and sports and art. And there are a few people out there who are good at that, but a few people who aren't. They don't project. They don't show. I don't mean this to be fake. They don't show the passion. They don't show, oh, wow, this stuff works. Now, you could sell a car, even if the car you're selling isn't your favorite car. It's a little harder if you're a car salesman. But you could do it. You can do it on the merits. You can say, hey, it's got 4 wheels and it works. But you want to sell a philosophy? And people don't get the impression from you that you're living any better than anybody else. You're not really any happier than anybody else. You seem to be angry most of the time, in fact. That's not going to work. So, one of my bits of advice on HBL, on the Harry Binswanger letter, on the meeting of the minds this morning was we've got to let that stuff out. And it's great because I spoke for maybe a minute and a half, not too long. And Harry Binswanger, okay, I've got to stop you there. Oh, well, he doesn't agree. He said, no, I agree completely. And we're already doing stuff with that in the Ayn Rand University and in my classes. And he went on and on about.
Good.
And I loved it. I love that he's already there.
Smart man.
We need that. We need that. And you need that for your own sake. I need that for my own sake.
Yeah, Christopher in the chat says, what is the metric? The metric.
What is the metric? I don't think there's a measurable for this one other than you see it, and it is undeniable. And you do see this. There are certain people. I mean, Yaron Brook is the arch example. There's somebody who, when you watch Yaron Brook, and when he talks about news, you can tell he gets it, and it matters. But when he talks about more than news, when he talks about art, when he talks about sports, when he talks about world events besides just politics, you actually see a man with joy of living, lust for life. Yaron Brook gets it. Harry Binswanger isn't quite as passionate and worked up a guy, but he's got that same, you can tell this is a man who loves his life. And you think, yeah, I want more of what he's got.
Right.
Whatever the ideas that are animating this person's sense of life isn't even the right word, because that's a little too basic, and a lot of that comes from childhood. But his general level of happiness, I want more of that. Whatever he knows, I want to know it. Whatever he's learned, I want to learn it. Whatever he's doing, I want to do, well, not what he's doing, but my version of that.
Yeah, I judge it. My metric is how many why philosophy books do I give out to my interns and coworkers at work?
You give out a lot of copies of Dr. Robert Garmong's book, Why Philosophy.
It's so small and tiny and cute and unintimidating. And people are like, hey, I'm going to read this. And they do.
Well, and it's readable.
Yes.
Some of you have nightstand collections. You know what I mean? You have books on your nightstand you're intending to read someday.
Mine are about this big.
And some of them you may have even cracked open, but they were either really hard to get through, a bit of a slog, or they just didn't really hold your interest, or they were kind of long and you couldn't find the time. And Why Philosophy doesn't suffer from any of those. This little booklet, Why Philosophy, it's surprisingly readable. It's actually enjoyable to read.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty easy to read,
definitely recommend that
you
one.
don't need any extra background in philosophy or objectivism to read it.
Yeah.
Sir Robert Garmong, he's done a great job with it, and I hope that he plans to continue on with different volumes of it to perhaps write a larger book with it.
Yeah. Now, if you're trying to get somebody into these ideas, and it's somebody who will read a book, like a long book, then you give them the Fountainhead. Or if they're I don't read fiction, then you give them a copy of The Virtue of Selfishness. But if it's somebody who you're just trying to get them interested in philosophy, but from the perspective of objectivism, why philosophy is pretty hard to beat. There's a lot of other great books out there, beginning books to try to get people. You got Andrew Bernstein, Objectivism in One Lesson. You got Tara Smith, Viable Values. You've got Craig Biddle's book, Loving Life. You got a lot. There's plenty of them out there. It's just why philosophy is really, it's so readable. It's really well done.
Yeah, it's a treat.
It's short and it's sweet and it's just enough content that people will read it and then say, okay, I want to know more about this.
You know, when I was a Nietzschean existentialist punk rocker...
You were what?
Yeah, when I was a teenager.
I'm glad you mentioned that because that's our next subject.
Oh,
but
really?
Go ahead.
So, I thought to myself, at some point I'm going to get my ideas out there in the world. You know, at the time I was pretty cynical and kind of depressed.
Uh-huh.
And it was a real fight. I thought, oh, this is going to be a real fight. And I'm going to have to go into politics, and I'll have to chain myself to something, and I'll have to get in front of a train or a bulldozer. I don't know. I thought I have all these great ideas. At the time, I did, of my own and reading about, I went from anarchism to communism to democratic socialism to capitalism and objectivism. And in a span of about 2.5 years. But I thought, you know what, there are these great ideas out there. I'm going to go ahead and promote them. It's really, really important that I do, and it's exciting to do it. And so I went through a lot of, different kinds of phrasing in my life and how to express that. We've attended rallies and protests and things like that in the past, and we just might do that again. I've been involved in the the Republican Party pre-Trump, and I've been spreading the word about reason and individual rights and limited government and all. So in all of that, I'm sure it added up to something. It's hard to say, well, I have a metric and a chart and a pie chart and a PowerPoint presentation. I'm going to give it to you. And then it'll prove it to you that my actions over so many decades, feels like centuries, have, added up to this. And look at how great this amount is. You're never going to get that. But you will get really interesting conversations with people. You'll get to see people's face light up, hopefully, when you talk to them. At least they'll get their curiosity satisfied. I've had a lot of people at work who look at me and say, you're unusual. And I'm glad of that. I want that to be shown. And I'm trying to keep putting myself out there as much as I possibly can in a way that it's intelligible to people. And I will keep doing that for the rest of my life. But that was the idea when I was a punk rocker. I'm like, I've got really interesting and unique ideas. I'm excited about them, and I want to spread those ideas, and I want to find like-minded people. And with that, I'm going to have tons of fun doing it. So that's been my strategy and goal. My goal is to take over the world all this time. So yeah.
Yes, and that's why after, if you want to sing out, the link in the show notes, Cat Stevens' song, and indeed, if you want to sing out. But after that, you see 3 links to, Dead Bob, which is a band that was formed by the drummer of the band No Means No. You'll see a link to No Means No tune, Slowly Melting, which incidentally, the band Dead Bob, with No Means No's drummer, will be playing on their current tour. And you will see 40 Years of Punk, an interview with John Wright of No Means No.
Oh, thanks for compiling all that.
Yes, and it's all in the show notes because I'm sure over the next few weeks you'll hear Amy talking about going to see the band No Means No,
Well, no, it's actually Dead Bob.
or Dead Bob,
Yeah.
with the drummer of No Means No.
Yeah, John Wright.
And there are several No Means No songs they will be playing in that band.
So I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but in the last, I'll just mention it again because I love it so much. So this is my DOA pin. DOA is a hardcore punk, one of the very first hardcore punk rock bands from the late 70s. They came out of Vancouver, BC, in Canada, and they are so great. I got to meet the lead singer last week. I got my picture taken with him. Oh my God, it was just... I was serenaded by the band like a foot away from my face. I mean, it was just the best. And the guitarist, who I later thanked, I went up to him and I thanked him and shook his hand. I said, thank you so much. Because when he was warming up his bass guitar, he chose one of the riffs that No Means No did. A song called Rags and Bones. And such a great riff. And anyway, I'm extremely excited to announce that in November, Dead Bob is going on tour. Just go to deadbob.ca. That means Canada /tour. And they have a whole bunch of... they're coming to Hamtramck, or Detroit, on November 15th. And I have tickets. And I'm going to be right up against the stage. And I'm just going to be like inside the bass drum of John Wright. And I'm just going to be like, no one will be able to move me. It's going to be great. Anyway, you can tell how happy I am. I cannot wait. This is a momentous event in my life because No Means No is very much my favorite band. And
so for anybody who was at Great Lakes Objectivists monthly dinner last night, I do want to apologize that the level of profanity was a little bit higher than usual. I did notice when the more cuss words got said, that's when the folks who left earliest in the evening left. So I hope that
Really?
wasn't a little too hard on the ears.
Last night, you mean?
Yes.
Who is cussing?
You were.
What?
But the cuss words... You have to understand, folks, the cuss words the cuss words were part of either the players' the names or the song titles. It was not just swearing for swearing's sake.
It was appropriate swearing. It's educational.
It was necessary because we don't have a little button that gives us a beeping out sound.
I don't think anybody left because of that.
Probably not. No.
You're funny.
And yes. Now Jim is in the chat. He's mentioned before that he doesn't regard himself as a singer, and so he's being a little self-deprecating in that regard. But before that, just real quick, he says, my issue with libertarians is that they seem not to consider philosophy primary to politics. It seems to me they think that politics is primary to every other field of knowledge, and they want freedom regardless of any philosophical foundation. And if you ask them, what is the root of your belief in freedom? I don't think they could give you an answer. Am I getting them correctly? The short answer is yes, but there are people who are fans of, well, first and foremost, there's a lot of libertarians who are fans of Ayn Rand. You couldn't call them objectivists because they wouldn't be libertarians, right? But the point is, yeah, there are libertarians who are Ayn Rand fans. There's also libertarians who are fans of Robert Nozick and other libertarian philosophers who've written long books, long tracts. Obviously, the pro-anarchists fall in that category. So you're right, but it's not all that they don't care about philosophy. Some of them just have the wrong philosophy. And some of them have hodgepodge philosophy, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. The so-called non-initiation of force principle, which they essentially stole from objectivism. I don't think Murray Rothbard would have come up with that on his own, but maybe he would. Either way, they have a bit of a, to use the expression from Philosophy Who Needs It, they have a mongrel philosophy. And you're right, some of them aren't philosophical at all.
Yeah.
But it's a mix, it's a hodgepodge, and that's one of libertarians' biggest problems. As Peter Schwartz has pointed out, they have a big tent, like a mind, an open mind, a mind that's so open that your brain
like
falls out.
But when I was in the GOP, when I was a state committee woman for the Michigan GOP, I would get up and I would do presentations on the foundations of individual rights and freedom. And it would go, and I did it in the most simplest way possible. but still, giving some people some, hoping that they'll be engaged with what I, the presentation that I gave, and it was really disappointing. I did this mainly at the Ron Paul group, the Campaign for Liberty group. It now is defunct. I don't even know if they exist anymore. We had a lot of more Tea Party-ish. A lot of people in my circle for our district. They were secular, and they seemed to be open to reason. And I gave them information. I gave them books. We passed out the Ayn Rand sampler everywhere up in the world, and it was nature of man's rights, or man's rights, the nature of government, all of this, and it was just kind of sad.
It's probably not a metaphor that I should use, because my taste in fine food is famously infantile, but it's like trying to take children to a fancy restaurant and they say, I want the chicken fingers. Don't they have macaroni and cheese?
I would go to the conventions up in Mackinac Island, and I would carry around my biggest and heaviest Atlas Shrugged version, or copy of Atlas Shrugged. And most people would be like, hey, yeah, like, oh, yeah, like you really understand it. I don't know. Maybe they did, again. But I actually got one guy who gave me the evil eye. He actually gave me the stink eye. And so I gave him the stink eye back. He was this older, crusty guy. And yeah, so anyway, that was a real trip. And this is before Donald Trump came onto the scene. Of course, when he did, I left. And I told everybody I knew what was going to happen. And I was right. Unfortunately.
Yeah. Amy showing up at the GOP is like Ayn Rand showing up at a Southern Baptist convention. Atheist in the house! Fortunately...
A lot of people knew that I was an atheist.
Yeah. Fortunately, most people don't immediately have that reaction to Atlas Shrugged in the GOP, but I'm not surprised you got the stink eye from at least one of them.
Yeah, kind of circling back to what you were saying about the illegality of people who were homosexuals and women not having any rights. Atheism was actually banned. If you were an atheist, you'd go to jail. I think, isn't that right? So I mean, it was. Yeah, I'm so happy we're living in 2024, even though, things might go south. Honestly, I think that compared to the 1800s, there are so many more resources and so many good people. I mean, despite the fact that a lot of people hold bad philosophical ideas, there's still decent people out there, and I'm not too concerned about, losing the house and living in a box.
Not going to happen.
No.
I always say, if you're worried about the end of the world because everything is so bad, talk to people who've lived in China. Robert Garmong for the last 10, 15 years.
15. Yeah.
China is a surprisingly livable place. You can look at the satellite photographs of their skyscrapers, and you can say, oh, that's the exception. It's because government money. For whatever reason, you can still live reasonably well in China, but it's a lousy place to live. I don't never want to be there. No, a better place to live would be Europe. Oh, wait a minute. What do you mean Europe? Europe is semi-socialist. And, look at the news, look at the riots and all of that, because they're semi-socialist and they let all these terrible things. Okay, yeah, Europe's not America. America's better than Europe. Look at America. Oh, wait, no, America's terrible, and we're a day away from the Second Civil War. Everything's falling apart. It's Trump versus Kamala. What are you talking about? I'll put it to you this way. When living in Europe is as bad as living in China, you can be worried. Or when living in the United States is as bad as living in Europe, you can be worried. But we are nowhere near Europe being as bad as China, and we are nowhere near the United States being as bad as Europe. So I'll just read my answers to you. How can we more quickly spread objectivism? What is the answer? We've done a lot since 1957, since Atlas Shrugged was released. I just have 2 bits of advice. And what I want is not for you to go out there and sell objectivism. I want you to do these things for your own sake. Number 1, our leaders and our spokespeople need to get passionate and personal. Not as an appeal to emotions, but as a testimony, as evidence of the efficacy of these ideas. When you see an objectivist give a lecture, participate in an interview, present a podcast, his or her demeanor should make any decent viewer think, hey, maybe these ideas have got real world substance. And I want some of whatever this guy has got, this gal has got. And a lot of us are friendly, but we're flat. And some of us aren't even very friendly. And we cannot convince people that objectivism, these ideas lead to success and happiness if we don't appear to be happy people. If people have to, average guy out there, if the average guy out there has got a pick where he can either have passion, joie de vivre, lust for life, happiness, if he's got to pick between all of that and objectivism, a bunch of objectivists who are kind of happy, maybe, but also a lot of the time annoyed or angry about the world and the way things are going. Well, what do you think he's going to pick? And it's not just a matter of picking, but what's he going to pay attention to? Whose ideas is he going to pay attention to? We don't need to be preachers. We don't need to be evangelists. We don't need to be Anthony Robbins. We don't need to be that kind of guy. But we do need to be willing to bring our joyousness to the fore, to the front, to attention. And if we don't experience joyousness, we need to reconsider how we're using these ideas, what this philosophy is doing for us. But assuming you've got it, you've got at least some passion about something, and these ideas are the reason why you are capitalizing on your values and making at least some of it happen, you got to be willing to put it out there. You got to be willing to let it out and not hide it. And Jim Ashley, you need to be willing to get out there and sing. No,
That's right.
I'm just kidding, although I'm really not kidding. But no, we need to be able to put it out there. And I am giving this advice to myself as much as anyone. Some people think that I'm really an excited, passionate guy, and sometimes I am. But I look back on some of our shows and I'm like, man, why am I holding back? I really need to put it out. Well, because you don't want to be extreme, and it's hard to listen to some guy who sounds like he's really hyped up. But we need more. We need more of that. We need to be at least as excited about life and let it show as much as Joe Rogan does, as much as Jordan Peterson does, as much as any of the successful podcasts, much less the personalities out there. Clowns like Andrew Tate. That should not be the guy who shows you, yeah, life can be exciting and you should do more. No, we should be the ones who are not irrational about it, but put it out there.
Yeah, I think there's mainly 2 things that we're missing. Number 1, patience and trying to understand what the ideas people hold are.
Ooh, you're leading right into my other item here.
I'm sorry.
But no, go ahead.
And the other one is how to express who you are and what you believe. I know it's like, simple, but but it's not. You're right. It's not. And so, I mean, again, I think I've used some examples on this show. I can talk about the virtues that I live by. That's easy enough. Talk about the virtues that you live by. Well, I really admire the virtue of honesty and the virtue of integrity. Talk about what the hell these things are, and talk about, then you can get into reason and rationality, then you can get into justice, independence, and productiveness and all of this if you want to. But the idea for me is that objectivism is a method of thinking, first and foremost. It's not a set of dogmatic commandments. It's a method of thinking that has helped me tremendously, and it brings, what it does to my life, it brings meaning to my life. we were talking about certainty and happiness. The lecture that Leonard Peikoff did last night. Robert did a
One of the best.
Robert did a great job guiding us through it.
Wow.
And we talked about this certain kind of like levels of happiness, joy versus happiness, things like that, and like the happiness of maintaining your values, for instance, not just not the ecstasy you get when you attain and you actually achieve a major goal in life, or however. It doesn't have to be that. But I think, and this is something I didn't say last night, but I really think the crux of it is that we have the words, we have the vocabulary to explain why these goals and values and even the method of thinking and the virtues are important to us, that they have meaning, that they really have visceral meaning, that they're heartfelt. You could say heartfelt, everybody. That they have their spiritual fuel and emotional value, and they mean a lot to me. These virtues and these values mean a lot to me, and this way of thinking means a lot to me, because it really brings clarity and meaning and substance to my life. That is something that Christians are always looking for that they never find. That is something that everybody is looking for that a lot of people don't find. I say, again, be personal about it. Talk about, how objectivism has improved your life and why and what that is. So, yeah.
Right. You kind of teased the second item, besides put the passion out there so people can see, oh yeah, this stuff's working. Number 2, we need to be willing to, this is a tough one, but I'll say it real quick. We need to be willing to engage with our opposition's ideas and take them seriously. We got to assume people really believe that stuff. And if you're going to reach those people, you can't just say, oh, well, Kantianism's crazy and communism's stupid and global warming's all a lie. If you're going to reach people, you don't have to. There's no obligation. But if you're even going to try, then you should do it smarter than that. Rather than just dismissing them with some zinger that makes them feel like they were owned, which is useless. And it's not just useless for them, it's useless for you. It's kind of a pseudo self-esteem, a false sense of esteem. No, in an intellectual battle, we cannot win without fighting the sum and the substance of the other ideas out there. It's a complicated world. There's a reason why people think objectivism isn't a real philosophy. And the reason isn't that objectivism isn't a real philosophy. The reason is that we, as philosophical warriors, don't engage other philosophies at the level at which they operate. Well, we know they're wrong. Why would we even get into that? But, to steal the line from Ayn Rand in Philosophy Who Needs It, they are wrong, but you don't know it. All too often we just try to own the opponent, which does rally the troops, and it wins over people who are already sort of on our side of the fence. But to win it in the long run, and hopefully it won't take centuries, since Dr. Binswanger doesn't want it to take that long, we have got to do better than that. So, this would mean accepting the fact that philosophy has substance and complexity, and that there are reasons why people believe the things that they believe, and it's not just cowardice and evasion. It's hard, but that's what's got to be done. It's not enough to be right. If we want to fight and win, we have got to be willing to get into the trenches, and that means their trenches. And in doing this, you've got to assume, this will sound crazy to some of you, you have got to assume good intent.
Yeah. Good point.
Even when the intentions on their part might be mixed. Sometimes people are not engaging in earnest. But in objectivism, we're already dealing with those kind of people. People who demand confrontation. We need the rest of the people out there, which I believe is the bulk of people. That's where we're falling short, and that's where the greatest wins will be found. And it's going to mean getting dirt under our fingernails, intellectually speaking. But that's part of a great life, is that kind of engagement. And you want a great life. You want to sing out. You want to live large. You want to be somebody who if you're going to try to sell ideas or even just have a fun conversation about ideas, people will look at it and say, oh, yeah, I think he's actually living those ideas, and I think it's actually working for him. You know, at the end of the film, not the end, near the end of the film Serendipity, our co-star is talking to his friend, the John Cusack character, and the Jeremy Piven character says, and there's some question about the veracity of this, but he's writing his friend's supposed obituary. He says, you know, the Greeks didn't write obituaries. They only asked one question after a man died. Did he have passion? Love that line. Yes. I hope you look in the mirror every day and say, I am living with passion. Even if you feel like you're not quite where you want to be yet, I am living with passion. I kind of make fun of Tony Robbins. I mentioned him earlier, but the first series of talks I ever heard by him, he would end every one of his talks with the expression, live with passion. I wish he hadn't said that, because it's something I wish I said at the end of every one of our shows. It's a great line. Folks, thank you for joining us. Amy, do we have anything else that you wanted to say before we wrap up, or anything in the chat? There's some great stuff going on in the chat.
I put some inklings about atheism in the chat on both.
Good. Amy did share some links and some notes, and make sure that you take a look at those. Folks, appreciate you being here. It was a crazy week. You know that we had an interview in the middle of the week with Scott Powell. If you didn't hear that one yet, listen to Tuesday's interview, youtube.com/Robert Nasir. It's right there. And on the Facebook side as well. We're getting about equal Facebook and YouTube engagement. So that's good to see. If you're on the YouTube side, we got to start working on those numbers again. We've been a little flat lately. So if you haven't already liked this episode, and assuming you did,
I'm liking it now.
I don't know why you would have stayed for 12 times 5 minutes if you didn't, but give it a like, and that will help the YouTube algorithms to tell more people to watch our stuff. If you're not already subscribed, subscribe at youtube.com/Robert Nasir. If you're not already spending big money on this show, I told you we send $22 a month to Harry Binswanger.
Yeah.
So if y'all want to send $22 a month or $2 a month or $200 a month to 5 Minutes with Robert and Amy Nasir, go to robertnasir.com. You will find links there to both Patreon and PayPal. You know, Patreon for monthly. PayPal, if you just want to give us a one-time contribution, you can do that too. And those of you who already support the show, thank you. You are the best. You really do encourage us to keep doing this every week, every month, every year, and through the centuries that we're all going to be alive if Harry Binswanger is right. And I think all that's left is to say thank you for joining us. We wish you every success that you so richly deserve. We want you to be, Amy just pointed out, I do actually have a Post-it note for the week. And, well, I'll show you the note and then I'll explain it. This is the Post-it note for the week.
Oh, what does it say?
It says, I love you. Probably.
There's conditions?
It came up both on a recent Yarn Brook show and this morning on HBO. You've got what Ayn Rand used to call unfastidious love, what some people criticize as unconditional love. And one of the people who does that, a proponent, is our own, that's one of those things where his name just left my mind.
Lex Friedman?
Lex Friedman. Lex Friedman, or Friedman, how he spells his name. That guy who came over from Russia, he's a super genius, but he's also a freaking hippie. He says things like, I love you, I love everyone. He says it at the end of his shows. He says it on Twitter. He says, I love everyone. This is a guy who knows as much about what's going on around the world as anybody. He knows there are people there he doesn't love. But he kind of means it. And I get it. I'm that way too. I love you guys, obviously, but I love my barista. Which barista? Any restaurant I go into and they serve me a decent meal. Any grocery store I go into and the cashier takes care of me. Any place I go and trade, I love those people. So I get it. I get the whole thing, but yeah, I had to change mine. It says, I love you, probably. And the reason why I wanted to share this Post-it note is because there are certain people out there, and probably nobody in this audience, but maybe people you could share this with. There are certain people out there who don't have that same feeling that the average, ordinary, not even objectivist person, they're decent people. They're all right. They're not rioting in the streets. In fact, they're going to work every day and getting things done. The average person, the ordinary person out there is not evil. And most of them are actually pretty good. So, I love you. Probably. Unless you're one of those rare exceptions, a really heinous person. And I've met a few. I've had to deal with in my life. And, look at the news, look at the Middle East, I won't even go into it. But you guys, you are the best audience in podcasting. Thank you for joining us. As always, we wish you every success that I know you do, you so richly deserve. All of the flourishing. Somebody said don't use the word flourishing. Flowers flourish. People don't flourish. Well, John Anderson said if we were flowers, we would worship the sun. So why not now?
Yes.
Folks, you get out there, you flourish, and live large. Make people wonder, what has that guy got? Because I want some of that. And that is why also we do wish you love.